Hello everyone, this is Sam with Spare Parts Brewing. I'm going to do a short video today about plastic. Really about any sort of reusable container for brewing. The idea behind Spare Parts Brewing is, of course, using spare parts, doing what you can, as much as you can with as little as possible. Don't buy anything, reuse as much as you can, etc. And I made mention in my previous video about reusing a plastic container and how it was safe to use. And I had someone ask about what other types of plastic are safe to use. So I thought I'd go over real quick some of the things that I use in my brew process. Now, first off, when brewing, glass is viewed by many home brewers as the absolute best. This is in fact an old Carlo Rossi wine jug. Buying a bottle of Carlo Rossi wine is almost the same price as buying a new one of these jugs from a brew supply store. So you might want to consider that if you're looking for a 1-gallon plastic jug. You can notice this one's pretty filthy on account of this is not one that I use anymore for anything important. I don't actually put much by the way of liquid in here that's fermenting, that's anything else. And why is because there's actually a chip in the glass around here, which means the lid does not seal on it, which really brings up the point of why I don't use glass very often. Glass is heavy and glass chips. So it's really nice to use in that it does not capture flavors. It's clear, you can see what's going on inside. Glass is good, but the fact that it's heavy and that it's chipped really kills it for me. And so I do have a 5-gallon glass carboy, but I don't use it on account of that. Now, one of the things I do use is stainless steel. This is a stainless steel pot that I got from a brew supplies. You know, it's marked with the gallon marks, which is really nice. Stainless steel is great for fermenting and for brewing on account of, it's really easy to clean. It's light compared to glass. You can drop it. Even if it bends a little, you can usually bend it back into place. But it has its time and place. There's a time and a place when you need something else entirely. So, for example, I have this little container here. We had gotten Mexican food for Cinco de Mayo, and this came in, rice or beans was in here. Now, I have collected a couple of these on account of how often I use these little tiny containers like this. They're great for measuring out hops. They're great for measuring out anything that you're adding to your water. Just little things like this. And the best part about these containers, and I'm almost positive you can't see this on camera, but it says right here, there's a little recycling logo, and then there's 5 with a PP underneath it. Now, this brings us to our first kind of plastic that's great for reusing. 5 PP is polypropylene. Polypropylene is a stable plastic, does not leach any flavors, does not release any toxic chemicals, nothing like that. It can go up towards, 30 to 80 degrees Celsius, which is 60 to like 160 degrees Fahrenheit, which is good. It cannot go near boiling or above boiling, so you want to keep that in mind. If you're boiling anything or if you have fresh boiled liquid, don't put them in this. So again, number 5, polypropylene. Another consideration is that at low temperatures, below freezing, it becomes brittle. So if you need to put something in the freezer, this is probably not a good idea. I don't know if anyone else has had this sort of happen, but they'll take a leftover container, they'll put it in the freezer with food inside of it, and then when you pull it out, you pull too hard, or you drop it or something like that, and it shatters. Probably polypropylene. So again, good to reuse, good for your washing, your cleaning, good for everything except when it gets real cold. So these are my polypropylene containers, and now here's the lids that came with it. Now this is even harder to see. Number 4, LDPE, low density polyethylene. Low density polyethylene is It's generally more flexible and softer than high density polyethylene, or HDPE. So it's generally more flexible. It can withstand some fairly high temperatures, again, not to boiling, but higher, and just the same, it is fairly good at low temperatures. So it's a good plastic. Again, no, it doesn't actively leach chemicals, doesn't really absorb flavors, things like that. So number 4 is a good use, and the lids of many of the brew buckets are actually that number 4 plastic, and that's again because it's a little more flexible. Moving on, I have some other examples here of what is number 2. Again, might be hard to see, but that's a number 2 on there. HDPE, high density polyethylene. Now this is pretty much what I would say is kind of the standard in brewing. HDPE is what your brew buckets are going to be made out of. HDPE. They are also what milk jugs are made out of. HDPE. So the number 2, again, it's a very good plastic to use. It's a little stiffer, but it can also then handle a slightly higher temperature. You can get up towards boiling in this. You really don't want to ever put boiling liquids into any of the plastics. But let's say you get your a fresh brew and worked down to, say, 180 degrees. You want to put it in plastic. The HDPE should be okay. Now, moving along to our last kind of plastic that is sort of usable. This is a jug of apple juice I got from Walmart, planning on doing a cider with this. This is number 1, and that's PET or PETE, polyethylene terephthalate. Number 1 plastic is also what you're going to find pop soda. The 2-liter bottles of pop and soda are in that. This jug, obviously, disposable water bottles, everything like that. It's a fairly good plastic to use, but it is meant for single use. Now, that means you don't want to reuse it if you can help it. I will not be reusing this jug, for instance, unless I'm using it for something, completely unrelated to brewing and storage. Like, you could cut the bottom off of this and then you could use it as a funnel. It's only getting splashed by liquid or maybe solids every so often. That would be okay. Moving right along, I have another little plastic container from my Mexican meal. Now the lid is a number 1 PETE. Again, this is not something we want to be actively reusing where it's contacting liquid, where it's contacting your product. But if it's a lid, in theory, put this on, the liquid's down here, it will very rarely touch this lid. So that usage should be fine. But then we move on to the actual bottom container here. Now, all I see here is Solo P400 4-ounce 11 Highland Park, Illinois. I don't see any number here, any sort of recycling number, which is a big giant red flag. I could probably go on Solo's website or whatever and find out what P400 is, but I'm not in such a dire need for plastics that I'm going to do that. So this plastic is one that will not only not be reused, but will end up in the garbage. You can't recycle this. At least there's no symbol indicating it can be recycled. So again, the lid could be safe. The cup, I would say not safe for brewing. Recycle the lid, throw the top away. And that brings us back to these lids I was looking at earlier. You saw me kind of looking at the edge here, trying to find anything that said what sort of recyclable it is. Couldn't find one. That means that I will not use this in any sort of situation where it would contact beer, where it would contact liquids, anything like that. Because I'm using these containers that are recyclable and it's just going to sit on top, again, it should be fine. You're going to, there isn't a reason why you should be filling this with liquid so that it touches the cap. So I'm keeping these lids, but unlikely I will ever use them. Now, I don't have any examples of the plastics that you truly do not want to use on account of I don't want to use them. But to review, we have one is PETE. This is, I'll give this a flat face. It's not quite a frowny face, not quite a happy face. You can keep this if you're not going to be reusing it for liquid, but it is meant as single use. 2 is HDPE. 4 is LDPE. And 5 is PP. And these all will rate a smiley face on account of they are good to use in your brewing. Now, you can notice we're missing some numbers. Most notably, what is number 3? Well, number 3 is polyvinyl chloride, or PVC. PVC is not safe. It leaches toxic chemicals into food and liquids. It is not very recyclable. It is not easily recycled. You basically want to avoid using number 3 whenever possible. So that's a big frowny face. The exception of using PVC, and I'm sure somebody out there is thinking, well, I just bought some tubing and it is PVC. Well, yes, it is. I happen to have PVC tubing myself right here. Now, this is a beverage safe PVC line. And how I know it's beverage safe is because, well, I bought it. But also, again, not sure that you can see this on the camera, but there's this marker here, right here, NSF. This is a food safety certification. Anytime you see that NSF, and again, I got another container here, NSF. Anytime you see this NSF, that means that it has been rated safe for foods, or that's what it should mean. You might want to double check. In this case, I have some petroleum jelly lubricant that I use for my kegs. It is NSF rated, which means it is safe to use around food. Likewise, this beverage line or this gas line, whatever I use it for, is safe to use for food. But unless you see that NSF, you want to avoid that number 3 plastic. That brings us past to number 6. Number 6 is polystyrene, or what people more often know as styrofoam. Styrofoam is the branded name, but not everything is actually styrofoam. You know, when you think of styrofoam, you think of, say, an igloo cooler, or I'm sorry, a cooler, one of those big white things with the, the squishy foam. Those are not meant for reusing. They're really not even safe for food. So that's the most common one I see when I'm talking about containers for, say, takeout food. Your takeout food is served in a polystyrene container. I'm not just talking about the white, clamshell. I'm also talking about some of the ones that are black with the, the clear lid that goes on top. Those probably are food safe on account of there's food in them, but without knowing the full story, I would avoid it. Finally, there's number 7. Number 7 is miscellaneous plastics. You're just going to want to avoid those on account of you have no idea what that miscellaneous plastic is. So, once again, if you want to reuse containers, if you want free containers, you absolutely want to focus on 2, 4, and 5. Again, 2, the high density polyethylene is your milk jugs, your brew buckets. Here's a tub of margarine. All of those are good to use. Your number 4 is going to be things like the lid for your brew bucket. Actually, I'm sorry, this one is a number 2 lid, but some of your lids will be number 4, low density polyethylene. And then finally we have our number 5, the polypropylene. Now the last thing I'll mention is the care and the cleaning of these plastics. I use soap. A lot of brewers strongly against soap, and I'll make another video about my cheap my cheap cleaning products. But this container here, I washed with soap and water. This one here, soap and water. When I get my brew buckets, these will be washed with soap and water. Every so often, I will wash them with something along the lines of the powdered brewer's wash, which is, I actually don't use that again. I'll make my cheap cleaning product video. I'll use OxyClean or Borax, very similar products. And lastly, when I have something like this that's been used a few times, even though it is a good plastic, even though it's the HDPE, it will develop smells. Anyone who's been brewing for a little while, they know that their brew bucket starts to smell really funky after a little while. I do another brewing no-no in that I will bleach them. A light bleach solution, fill it, let it sit for hours. That should handle the flavors, and of course that should make sure that you do not have an infection in your brew buckets. This is another reason why glass and stainless steel is preferred, is because those you will not get an infection. You don't get bacteria hiding inside the micro pores that you can't see, which is what happens with plastic. But ever so often, just bleaching them is very effective in that, eliminating any flavors, smells, bacteria. Of course, if you start to see your plastic degrading, if it looks exceptionally brittle, or if you see parts of it coming off, then it's time to pitch it. So that's it for plastics. Again, this is Sam with Spare Parts Brewing.